Sometimes a single act of kindness asks for nothing in return, yet it can find its way back years later when we need it most. In a small town nestled among maple-lined streets in the eastern United States, there was a bakery that had stood for nearly 30 years. It wasn't a large bakery. It didn't have a flashy sign. There were never long lines of customers waiting outside every morning. Hanging above the entrance was only an old wooden sign that simply read, "Miller's Bakery." Every day, while the entire town was still wrapped in the cold morning mist, the lights inside the bakery would already be on at 3 o'clock. The steady sound of the mixer filled the room. The smell of butter and freshly baked bread slowly drifted through the quiet streets. The owner was David Miller, a man in his late 50s whose hair had already begun to turn gray. His hands were rough from decades of kneading dough, yet he handled every loaf with the same care, as if he were preparing a gift for someone. Helping him was his only daughter, Olivia. Her mother had passed away when she was still very young. From that day on, father and daughter had relied on each other, making a living through this little bakery. Their work began long before sunrise. By late morning, the last batches of bread would usually be sold. In the afternoon, they cleaned the shop and prepared ingredients for the next day. Their lives followed the same routine year after year. They were never wealthy, but they never had to worry about missing a meal. David often told his daughter, "I've never dreamed of becoming the richest man in town. As long as I can open this bakery every morning and still have the strength to bake warm bread, I'm happy." Olivia always smiled whenever she heard her father say those words. To her, life was simple, but it was enough. At least, the two of them still had each other. That morning began just like every other day. Fresh loaves came out of the oven, filling the bakery with their warm aroma. Regular customers stopped by one after another before heading to work. An elderly man bought 2 loaves, just as he always did. A young school teacher picked up a sandwich on her way to school. An older couple shared a single loaf as they slowly walked down the street together. David remembered almost everyone's name. If one of his regular customers didn't show up for several days, he would notice. By late morning, the bakery became quieter. Olivia placed the last tray of bread onto the display shelf. As she looked through the front window, she noticed a little boy standing beneath a tree across the street. He wore an old jacket with worn-out elbows. His oversized pants were tied around his waist with a piece of string. His shoes were so worn that the front of one shoe had nearly come apart. His face was dusty. His hair was messy, as if it hadn't been cut in a long time. But what caught Olivia's attention most were his eyes. They were bright, clear, and unusually gentle. The little boy stood there for a long time, quietly staring at the fresh bread displayed behind the glass. His eyes never left it. Then, he lowered his head and silently walked away. Olivia assumed he was simply a child passing by. She returned to her work. The following afternoon, while wiping down the counter, Olivia happened to glance outside again. The same little boy was standing in exactly the same place, still looking toward the bakery. This time, he took a few hesitant steps toward the entrance. But the moment a customer walked out, he stepped back, then quickly turned and walked away. On the 3rd day, nothing had changed. David began to notice him as well. He didn't say a word. He simply watched the small figure disappear down the street. On the 4th day, the little boy came back once again, This time his stomach let out a quiet growl. He quickly placed a hand over it and looked around, hoping no one had heard, then lowered his head. Olivia saw everything from inside the bakery. She quietly looked over at her father. David remained silent. He watched the boy for a few more seconds. Then a gentle smile appeared on his face. He picked up a loaf of bread that had just come out of the oven, placed it inside a brown paper bag, handed it to Olivia, and softly said, "Go take this to him." Olivia took the paper bag. The loaf was still warm. The gentle warmth passed through the thin paper into her hands. She walked out of the bakery. The little boy startled when he saw someone coming toward him. Instinctively, he turned around ready to leave. "Hey," Olivia called softly. Her voice was gentle. The little boy stopped, but he remained standing a few steps away. Olivia smiled. "Come here." The little boy quietly shook his head. I don't have any money." Olivia held out the paper bag. "I know. It's for you." The little boy quickly waved his hands. "No, I can't. I can't take it." Olivia didn't say another word. She gently placed the bag on the wooden bench in front of the bakery. "Then I'll leave it here. You can take it whenever you want." With that, she turned and walked back inside. Through the front window, father and daughter quietly watched. The little boy remained where he was. He looked at the loaf of bread, then toward the bakery. After a long moment, he slowly walked over. With both small hands, he carefully picked up the paper bag. He held it tightly against his chest, then bowed deeply toward the bakery. "Thank you. Thank you, miss." As soon as he finished speaking, he ran away. David smiled gently. "He's a good kid." Olivia watched the little figure disappear around the corner. For some reason, she found herself hoping he would come back the next day. And he did. The following afternoon, the little boy returned, standing beneath the same old tree. But this time, he didn't walk away. David noticed him. He gave Olivia a small nod. "Go invite him in." Olivia stepped outside. "Hey!" The little boy looked up. "Yes, come here." He slowly walked toward the bakery. When he reached the entrance, he still didn't dare step inside. Olivia handed him another warm loaf of bread. He accepted it with both hands. "Thank you, miss." Then he reached into his pocket. He carefully placed a few old coins on the counter. "This is all I have." Olivia smiled. "Keep them. You can pay me when you come to buy bread someday." The little boy hesitated for a few seconds, then quietly slipped the coins back into his pocket. Just then, David walked over. He crouched down until he was at the little boy's eye level. "What's your name?" The little boy answered politely. "My name is Ethan." David smiled. "I'm David. And this is Olivia." Ethan immediately bowed his head. "Hello, Mr. David." "Hello, Miss Olivia." David gently patted his head. "From now on, if you're ever hungry, just come by. There will always be warm bread waiting here. If you're still hungry, come back." Ethan looked up at David. His eyes had turned red. He pressed his lips together, then quietly nodded. From that day on, Ethan stopped by the bakery almost every afternoon. Some days he came early. Other days his small figure wouldn't appear until the sun was almost setting. But every single time, he would stop outside the door first, then quietly call out, "Mr. David, Miss Olivia." Only after hearing one of them answer would he shyly step inside. David never asked why Ethan only came in the afternoons. He never asked where the boy lived, or whether he still had any family. If Ethan wanted to tell his story one day, he would tell it. For now, perhaps all he needed was a warm loaf of bread. One afternoon, Olivia had just placed a loaf on the table when Ethan quickly shook his head. "I've already eaten today." Olivia looked at his dusty little face and smiled. "Then take it with you for dinner." Ethan hesitated for a few seconds, but in the end he accepted it. "Thank you, miss." Not long after that, Olivia began to notice something. Some days Ethan arrived very late. His clothes were covered in dust. His shirt was soaked with sweat. Over his shoulder was always an old burlap sack. Inside were old newspapers, empty cans, plastic bottles, and other things people had thrown away. Only then did she understand. During the day, Ethan made a living collecting recyclable scraps. Some days his sack was full. He walked into the bakery wearing a brighter smile than usual. Other days, he spent the entire day searching, yet his sack remained almost empty. On those days, Ethan usually arrived much later. He would leave the sack outside the door, then walk inside, still smiling as he greeted David and Olivia, just as he always did. David glanced at the nearly empty sack resting outside. He didn't ask a single question. He simply walked into the kitchen. A moment later, he returned with a freshly baked loaf of bread and placed it in front of Ethan. "Go ahead." Ethan sat down at the little table beside the window. Holding the warm loaf with both hands, he ate slowly, one bite at a time. David watched him quietly for a moment, then walked back inside. A little while later, he came out carrying a glass of warm milk and gently placed it beside the bread. "Take your time." Ethan looked at the glass of milk, then looked up at David. "Thank you, Mr. David." David simply gave a gentle nod, then returned to the counter. From that day on, whenever Ethan came back with an almost empty sack, there was always a warm glass of milk waiting beside his bread. No one ever mentioned it, and Ethan never refused it again. He simply ate quietly. Before leaving, he always gathered the little crumbs from the table and carefully pushed his chair back into place. One afternoon, Ethan arrived earlier than usual. His sack was already half full. Olivia was pulling the tables inside by herself. Ethan quietly set his sack against the wall. Without saying a word, he hurried over and grabbed the other side of the table. Olivia looked at him. "What are you doing?" "I'm helping you." "You don't have to. You should get some rest." Ethan gently shook his head. "I'm not tired." Olivia smiled, then let him help. The two of them carried the tables inside together. A moment later, Ethan noticed a broom leaning against the wall. He picked it up and began sweeping the crumbs from the floor. David walked out from the kitchen. He stood there watching for a moment before asking, "Who asked you to do that?" Ethan stopped sweeping. "No one." "Then why are you doing it?" Ethan looked down at the broom in his hands. "You and Miss Olivia have given me bread so many times. I just wanted to help a little." David looked at him for a few seconds, then reached for another broom. "Then let's start over here." Ethan looked up. David had already begun sweeping the other side of the floor, as though it had always been a job the two of them shared. A smile slowly appeared on Ethan's face. He lowered his head and continued sweeping. From that day on, whenever Ethan finished collecting scraps early, he stopped by the bakery before closing time. Sometimes he wiped the tables. Sometimes he stacked the chairs. Sometimes he helped Olivia organize the paper bags beneath the counter. David never treated it as work exchanged for bread. He still gave Ethan something to eat just as he always had. And Ethan never asked for anything in return. He simply did whatever he could, then sat down to eat whenever David called him. Little by little, the small chair beside the window became Ethan's usual place. His old sack was always left neatly outside the door, and every afternoon, his shy little greeting became part of the bakery itself. One weekend afternoon, the bakery was busier than usual. David was busy taking bread out of the oven. Olivia was constantly helping customers and ringing up orders. Ethan arrived just then. Seeing how busy the two of them were, he quietly leaned his old sack against the wall, then picked up a cleaning cloth. Without saying a word, he began wiping each table as customers finished their meals. No one asked him to do it. He simply did it. When the last customer finally left, Olivia looked around. Every table had already been cleaned. She turned around. Ethan was carefully arranging the chairs back into place. She smiled. "You did all of this?" Ethan looked up. A shy smile appeared on his face. "Yes. I saw you were busy, so I wanted to help." Olivia walked over. She gently brushed a little flour from his shoulder. "Thank you." Ethan lowered his head shyly. Just then, David walked out of the kitchen. He was carrying 3 freshly baked loaves. He placed one in front of Ethan. The other 2 went onto the display shelf. Fresh out of the oven, it tastes best while it's still warm. Ethan picked up the loaf, but instead of eating, he looked across the street. An elderly man was sitting alone on a bench, quietly drinking a bottle of water. Ethan broke the loaf in half, then hurried across the street. A few minutes later, he came back. Only half of the loaf remained in his hands. Olivia looked at him. "Do you know that man?" Ethan shook his head. "No. I saw him sitting there all morning. I thought he might be hungry too." Olivia looked at the half loaf still in Ethan's hands. She didn't say anything. David simply smiled. That afternoon, as Ethan was about to leave, David called him back. He opened a small paper box from the drawer. Inside were a few freshly baked cookies. "Take these with you." Ethan quickly shook his head. "I already have the bread." David placed the box gently into Ethan's hands. "The bread is for dinner. The cookies are for tomorrow." Ethan looked down at the little box, then looked back at David. He held it tightly against his chest, gave a small bow, then quietly walked out of the bakery. Father and daughter stood by the doorway, watching the little boy disappear down the street. David quietly turned back inside and continued cleaning the baking trays. Olivia remained standing by the door. Her eyes rested on the small chair beside the window. The chair Ethan had just been sitting on was still slightly out of place. She walked over, gently pushed it back where it belonged, then smiled softly. Outside, the little boy and his old sack slowly disappeared beyond the line of trees, and the little bakery returned to its usual peaceful rhythm. The seasons quietly came and went. The trees in front of the bakery changed from green to golden leaves, then stood bare through the winter, before fresh buds appeared once again. Nearly a year had passed since the day Ethan first stood outside the bakery. Little by little, things began to change. The old jacket with the worn-out shoulders was gone. Olivia had quietly saved a little money whenever she could. From time to time, she bought Ethan a new shirt, a pair of pants that actually fit him, or a warm pair of shoes for the winter. None of them were expensive, but they were always clean, neat, and the right size for Ethan. Whenever he received new clothes, he would shyly lower his head, holding them carefully against his chest. The very next day, he would proudly wear them back to the bakery, and the smile on his face seemed brighter than before. The old sack still rested on his shoulder every day, but it no longer looked as heavy as it once had. After finishing his route collecting recyclable scraps, Ethan stopped by the bakery almost every afternoon. Some days he wiped the tables. Some days he swept the front sidewalk. Other days he helped David carry small bags of flour into the storage room. None of the jobs were difficult, but Ethan always did them with energy and with a smile on his face. Sometimes, David had barely unlocked the front door in the morning when he found Ethan already sitting on the front step, waiting quietly for them. Seeing him there, David simply smiled. Olivia would always ask, "You're here early today?" Ethan scratched the back of his head. "I finished early today." The three of them walked into the bakery together. Each naturally began doing their own work. No one needed to say anything. It had simply become part of their routine. Little by little, the small chair beside the window was no longer Ethan's favorite place. He had grown used to standing behind the counter, carrying bread to customers, and wiping down the tables before new guests came in. Many of the regular customers in town had also come to know Ethan. They smiled whenever they saw him. Some even greeted him by name. Once in a while, someone would ask David, "Is he your son?" David would simply smile, then glance over at Ethan, who was busy wiping another table. He never answered, and Ethan never heard the question. The bakery was still the same little bakery it had always been, but somehow, there seemed to be a little more laughter inside than before. And the thing that made David and Olivia happiest wasn't having an extra pair of helping hands. It was seeing Ethan smile more and more with each passing day. One afternoon, after helping David carry bags of flour into the storage room, Ethan sat down as he always did. Olivia placed a warm loaf of bread in front of him. Ethan smiled. "Thank you, miss." He picked up the loaf, then quietly set it back down. His fingers intertwined, as if he were struggling to say something. Olivia looked at him. "What's wrong?" Ethan hesitated. After a long moment, he finally spoke. "Miss, could I have one more loaf today?" Olivia looked a little surprised. It was the first time Ethan had ever asked for extra bread. She was just about to ask why, when David quietly picked up another loaf, slipped it into a paper bag, and handed it to Ethan. He never asked for a reason. He simply smiled. Ethan accepted it with both hands. "Thank you, Mr. David." He held the paper bag close to his chest. Olivia looked at him. "Are you taking it home?" Ethan gently shook his head. "A few days ago, a little boy came to where we stay. He's still very young, and he's not used to collecting scraps yet. He barely finds anything all day." Ethan looked down at the paper bag. His voice grew softer. "I'm afraid he might be hungry." Olivia fell silent. She glanced at David. He simply smiled, without saying a word. That afternoon, Ethan left the bakery carrying 2 bags of bread. One was for himself. The other was for the younger boy. The next day, the moment Ethan walked into the bakery, 2 warm paper bags were already waiting in the little table beside the window. He looked up at David. David was arranging bread on the shelves. Without turning around, he simply said, "Don't keep him waiting." A smile spread across Ethan's face. Yes, sir. He picked up both bags, bowed politely to David and Olivia, then hurried out of the bakery. A few minutes later, he came back. The same old sack rested on his shoulder. The same gentle smile was on his face. From that day on, there were always 2 bags of bread waiting on the little table by the window, one for Ethan, the other for a little boy David and Olivia had never met, and neither of them ever asked another question. Time quietly moved on. Each day the little bakery was filled with laughter. In the mornings, David baked fresh bread. Olivia arranged the loaves on the shelves. In the afternoons, Ethan always appeared with the same old sack over his shoulder. Some days the 3 of them sat together outside the bakery, sharing a simple meal. Other days Ethan happily told them about an old item he had found while collecting scraps, and the 3 of them would laugh together. The peaceful days continued until one early autumn morning. David had just unlocked the bakery door when he saw Ethan already waiting outside. He had come much earlier than usual. His old sack was gone, and instead of running over to greet them like he always did, he simply stood there, holding a small backpack tightly against his chest. Olivia walked over, smiling gently. "You're not collecting scraps today?" Ethan quietly shook his head. He tried to smile, but his eyes were already red. David looked at him. He could tell something was different today. He opened the bakery door. "Come inside, son." Ethan quietly followed them in. The 3 of them sat down at the familiar little table beside the window. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Ethan slowly took a white envelope out of his backpack. He held it carefully with both hands, as though he was afraid of dropping it. He looked at David, then at Olivia. A faint smile appeared on his face, but tears were already gathering in his eyes. "Mr. David, Miss Olivia, yesterday, someone came to see me." Olivia gently held Ethan's hand. "Who was it?" Ethan lowered his head. "They told me they found a family. They want to adopt me." He looked up again. For the first time, a smile and tears appeared on his face at the same time. "They also said, I'll be able to go to school. I'll have a mom and a dad. And I'll be moving far away." The little bakery fell completely silent. No one said another word. Only the warm smell of freshly baked bread quietly filled the room. The silence lingered for a long time. Olivia still held Ethan's small hand. She smiled, though her eyes had quietly filled with tears. "That's wonderful news." Ethan gave a small nod. "Yes." David remained silent. He looked at the envelope on the table, then looked back at Ethan. "Do you want to go?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked at David, then at Olivia, before lowering his head again. After a long silence, he finally nodded. "Yes, I do. I want to go to school. And someday, I want to become someone who can help others." David smiled. He gently patted Ethan's hair. "Then go. Don't worry about us." Ethan bit his lip. He tried to smile, but tears slowly rolled down his cheeks. Olivia picked up a tissue from the table and gently wiped them away. "When are they coming for you?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Tomorrow morning. I think this is probably my last day here." No one spoke again. David quietly stood up. He walked into the back room. A few moments later, he returned carrying a large paper box. Inside were all of Ethan's favorite pastries. David placed the box in front of him. "Take these with you. You might get hungry on the way." Ethan looked at the box, then gently shook his head. "It's too much, Mr. David." David smiled warmly. "You're leaving tomorrow. Let me do this for you." This time, Ethan didn't refuse. He quietly held the box against his chest. That afternoon, he didn't wipe the tables. He didn't sweep the front of the bakery. The three of them simply sat together, sharing warm bread fresh from the oven. Every now and then, they looked at one another and smiled. No one mentioned tomorrow, as though by leaving it unspoken, the goodbye might come a little later. Outside the bakery window, the first autumn leaves quietly drifted onto the front steps. None of them knew that it would be the last afternoon Ethan would sit in the little chair by the window for many years to come. The next morning, David woke up earlier than usual. He turned on the lights inside the bakery, unlocked the front door, then, almost without thinking, he looked toward the end of the street. A few minutes later, Olivia stepped outside, standing quietly beside her father. The two of them silently watched the familiar road for nearly a year, every single morning. Before the bakery opened, a little boy had always been waiting there, an old burlap sack over his shoulder, a shy smile on his face. But this morning, the street was quiet. The familiar little figure was nowhere to be seen. David remained there for another moment, then smiled softly. He turned toward Olivia. She was still looking down the street. Father and daughter looked at each other. There was a quiet sadness in their eyes, but also a gentle sense of happiness, because they knew. From this day on, Ethan had begun a new life, the kind of life they had quietly wished for him all along. David slowly pulled the bakery door open a little wider. The morning sunlight gently filled the shop. He walked inside and began preparing the first batch of bread. As Olivia walked past the little chair beside the window, she instinctively straightened it, then paused for a few seconds. A faint smile crossed her face before quietly returning to her work. The bakery opened as it always did. The smell of fresh bread once again drifted through the little town. The regular customers came in one after another. Only, from that day on, the little chair by the window no longer held the familiar sight of Ethan sitting there. Time quietly moved on. The little bakery continued opening its doors every morning. The smell of fresh bread remained familiar throughout the town. Only, things were no longer quite the same. Olivia had graduated. She found a stable job at a company near the town. Every morning, she still stopped by the bakery to help her father for a while before heading to work. After work each evening, she came back, and the two of them cleaned up the bakery together, just as they always had. David was still the first one awake every morning. He kneaded every batch of dough himself and placed every loaf into the oven with his own hands. Olivia had asked him many times, "Dad, you should get some rest. I have a job now. I can take care of both of us." David would simply smile. "I'm still healthy. As long as I can work, I will." Olivia knew. Her father didn't just love the bakery. He loved the familiar customers who stopped by every morning. He loved the smell of fresh bread coming out of the oven. And he loved knowing that every day he could still help someone in his own small way. Even so, Olivia began noticing that her father seemed more tired than before. Some days, he would suddenly stop in the middle of talking to a customer, stand still for a few seconds, then continue as if nothing had happened. Other times, he would briefly press a hand against his chest, The moment he noticed Olivia looking at him, he smiled. "I'm just getting old. It's nothing." Olivia urged him to see a doctor many times, but David would only nod, then quietly return to work. Until one morning. The bakery had been open for only a short while. David was taking a tray of freshly baked bread out of the oven when he suddenly froze. The tray tilted in his hands. He reached for the edge of the table to steady himself. His breathing became heavy. One of the regular customers immediately stood up. "David!" Olivia rushed out from behind the counter. "Dad!" David forced a faint smile, as if trying to tell her he was fine. But the next second, his legs gave way. The tray crashed onto the floor. Fresh loaves scattered across the bakery. Olivia dropped to her knees beside him. Two regular customers rushed over to help. One called an ambulance. The other helped Olivia lift David into it. Throughout the ride to the hospital, Olivia never let go of her father's hand. She kept calling to him. "Dad." David slowly opened his eyes, looked at his daughter, then quietly closed them again. A short while later, the emergency room doors closed behind him. Olivia sat alone outside, her hands tightly clasped together. Her eyes never left the door. Nearly 2 hours passed. A doctor finally walked out. He removed his mask and looked at Olivia. "Are you Mr. David's daughter?" Olivia immediately stood up. The doctor gave a small nod. "Your father's condition is quite serious. This isn't a new illness. There are clear signs that he's been living with it for quite some time." Olivia stood there in silence, her eyes slowly filled with tears. Every moment her father had quietly held his chest. Every time he smiled and said he was just tired. Every time she had begged him to see a doctor, came rushing back to her all at once. The doctor looked at her gently. "Perhaps he simply didn't want you to worry." Olivia tried her best to remain calm. "Doctor, will my father be all right?" The doctor gave a gentle nod. "For now, his condition has been stabilized, but he needs surgery as soon as possible." Olivia clasped her hands tightly. "The surgery, it can be done, right?" "Yes, but the cost will be significant." The doctor opened the medical file, carefully reviewed the test results, then spoke slowly. "The estimated cost is around $85,000. Olivia stood there in silence. The number was far beyond anything she could possibly afford. The doctor closed the file. "We'll do everything we can, but you should make arrangements as soon as possible. The longer the surgery is delayed, the greater the risk will become." After saying that, he gave her a small nod, then quietly walked back toward the treatment area. The hospital hallway fell silent once again. Olivia slowly sat down on the chair outside the emergency room. She buried her face in her hands, trying to hold back her tears, but they quietly slipped through her fingers. That afternoon, Olivia returned to the bakery. The front door was still open. The bread baked that morning was still sitting on the shelves. The familiar smell of fresh bread still filled the room. Only, the person who had always stood behind the counter was no longer there. She slowly walked through the bakery, picking up the baking tray that one of the regular customers had carefully placed in the corner. Then she looked around. Every corner of the bakery carried traces of her father. His apron still hung behind the door. His baking gloves still rested on the work table. The old clock on the wall continued ticking as it always had. Olivia opened the drawer beneath the counter, hoping there might be some savings left. She took out a small notebook and slowly turned each page. Every expense had been carefully recorded in David's handwriting: flour, electricity, oven repairs, medicine, and finally, the amount of money he had managed to save. Olivia quietly lowered her head. It was only a tiny fraction of the $85,000 needed for the surgery. She slowly closed the notebook and looked around the little bakery once more. For the first time in many years, the small bakery felt unbearably quiet. That night, Olivia sat alone inside the bakery. Her eyes slowly wandered across the small shop. Everything was exactly as it had always been. The old oven her father had used for decades, the worn wooden counter, the tables and chairs he had repaired countless times with his own hands. Then, a single thought quietly crossed her mind. Perhaps there was only one way left: sell the bakery. Olivia slowly closed her eyes. Her chest tightened. It wasn't just a bakery. It was the place where her father had spent nearly his entire life. The place where she had grown up. The place that held almost every memory they shared. If she sold it, her father would be heartbroken. But if she didn't, she might lose him forever. Olivia remained there for a long time. Outside, the night grew quieter. Inside the bakery, only the steady ticking of the old clock filled the silence. She thought about it all night, until the first rays of morning sunlight slipped through the window. Olivia slowly stood up. Her eyes were red from a sleepless night. At last, she had made her decision. This morning, she would go to the hospital, sign the consent form for her father's surgery. Then, she would find someone to buy the bakery. It was the last thing she could do to keep her father alive. Outside, the town was beginning another ordinary day. Cars filled the streets. People hurried to work as usual. Only Olivia walked quietly toward the hospital, holding her father's medical file tightly against her chest. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Her face still showed the exhaustion of a night without sleep. When the hospital came into view, she stopped for a moment, took a deep breath, then slowly walked inside. Olivia walked quickly down the hospital hallway, still holding her father's medical file tightly against her chest. She stopped in front of his room, took a deep breath, then slowly opened the door. The moment it opened, she froze. The bed was empty. For a split second, her heart seemed to stop. A terrifying thought rushed into her mind. "Dad!" Olivia immediately turned around and hurried out into the hallway. Just then, the attending physician walked toward her. "Olivia," she rushed to him. "Where's my father?" "What happened, doctor?" The doctor gently raised a hand, motioning for her to stay calm. "Mr. David is all right. The surgery was very successful." Olivia stood there in shock. Her eyes widened, unable to believe what she had just heard. The doctor smiled. "He's been moved to the recovery room. He's still under the effects of the anesthesia. You should go see him." Olivia could barely say a word. She turned and hurried toward the recovery room. Through the glass window, she saw David lying peacefully in bed. His heartbeat remained steady on the monitor. Olivia covered her mouth. Tears quietly rolled down her cheeks. She stood there for a long time, until she finally managed to calm herself. Then she returned to the doctor. "Doctor, my father had the surgery, but..." The doctor understood what she was trying to ask. He smiled gently. "Don't worry. The entire cost of the surgery has already been paid." He then handed Olivia the receipt. Her hands trembled as she took it. Her eyes stopped at the last line, paid in full. Olivia slowly looked up. "Who paid my father's medical expenses, doctor?" The doctor smiled. "It was our chief of surgery. He also personally performed your father's operation." Olivia stood there in silence. She searched her memory, but couldn't remember ever knowing a doctor like that. The doctor gently pointed toward the end of the hallway. "The chief of surgery's office is at the end of the hall." Olivia gave a quiet nod, a silent gesture of gratitude, then slowly walked toward the end of the hallway. Every step she took was filled with both gratitude and uncertainty. She stopped in front of the office door, knocked softly. "Come in." Olivia slowly opened the door. Inside, a young doctor stood beside the window. His white coat was perfectly pressed. His face looked kind. His eyes were warm. Hearing the door open, he slowly turned around. Olivia lowered her head politely. "Excuse me, doctor. I wanted to ask, why did you help my father?" The young doctor smiled, walked toward her, then said softly, "Miss Olivia, it's me." Olivia stood frozen. She looked at the young doctor standing before her. Her eyes were still filled with disbelief. "Ethan?" The young doctor smiled softly, then nodded. "Yes, it's me. I'm Ethan." Olivia covered her mouth. Tears quietly rolled down her cheeks once again. "Ever since the day you left, I thought we would never see each other again." Ethan smiled gently. "I've been looking for you and Mr. David all these years." Olivia wiped away her tears. "Then, how did you recognize us?" Ethan spoke softly. "Yesterday, Mr. David's case was transferred to the cardiology department. Normally, when a patient needs emergency heart surgery, I'm the one who reviews the medical records first." Ethan smiled faintly. "When I opened the file, I saw Mr. David's name. It felt so familiar, but I still didn't dare believe it. Then I looked at the emergency contact. I saw your name, Olivia, and then I saw the address. It was this town. At that moment, I couldn't stop thinking, could it really be Mr. David and Miss Olivia, the two people who once took care of me, or was I simply mistaken?" Olivia listened quietly. Ethan continued, "When I was adopted, I was still very young. I only remembered a small bakery, a kind man, and an older sister who always looked after me. I couldn't remember the street name. I couldn't remember the house number. I only remembered it was a small town. As I grew older, I came back many times to look for you, but I never knew where to begin. The town had changed so much. I walked through countless streets, but I still couldn't find you." Ethan lowered his head slightly. "When I finally knew it was really Mr. David, I was so happy. At last, I finally had the chance to thank him." Olivia looked at Ethan. Her eyes were still red with tears. A gentle smile appeared through them. "My father will be so happy when he finds out that the little boy he always talked about has become such a wonderful doctor." Ethan gently shook his head. "If it hadn't been for Mr. David and for you, there wouldn't be the person I am today." David slowly opened his eyes. He saw Olivia holding his hand tightly. In a weak voice, he whispered, "Olivia." Tears immediately filled Olivia's eyes. "Dad, I'm here." David gave a slight nod. Olivia gently wiped away her tears, then smiled softly. "Dad, look. This is the doctor who performed your surgery. Do you recognize him?" David slowly turned his head. His eyes rested on the young doctor. He looked at him for a long moment, as if searching through an old memory. Ethan stepped closer, smiled gently. "Mr. David." "It's Ethan." David suddenly froze. His eyes widened. He looked at Ethan, then looked again, more carefully this time. His eyes slowly filled with tears. "Ethan, is it really you?" Ethan nodded softly. "Yes, it's me." David slowly lifted his trembling hand. Ethan immediately reached out and held it, the same hand that had once placed warm loaves of bread into the hands of a hungry little boy. Even now, it still felt just as warm. David gently squeezed Ethan's hand. A tear quietly rolled down his cheek. You've grown up." In the days that followed, Olivia no longer lived in constant fear. Every day after work, she stopped by the hospital to visit her father, and every time she arrived, she found Ethan sitting beside David. Sometimes, the two of them simply sat quietly by the window, watching the world outside. Sometimes, they reminisced about the old days. Whenever Ethan finished his work, he would always find time to stop by. Before leaving the department, he never forgot to ask the nurses and doctors to keep a close eye on Mr. David. Seeing all of this, Olivia finally felt at peace. A few weeks later, David's health had recovered well. On the day he was discharged, the gentle autumn sunlight covered the road outside the hospital. Olivia slowly pushed his wheelchair. Ethan walked beside them. The three of them smiled and talked all the way home. No one mentioned the desperate days they had been through. Back at the bakery, Olivia carefully cleaned every corner. Everything looked neat again. The old oven, the wooden counter, the familiar tables and chairs. Everything was still there. A few days later, on a quiet Sunday morning, the little bell above the bakery door rang softly. Ethan walked in, holding a small bouquet of flowers and some fruit. The moment David saw him, his eyes lit up with joy. "You're here," Ethan smiled. "Yes, I had the day off today." David slowly stood up. "Wait for me a moment." Olivia quickly walked over. "Dad, you should rest." "I'll do it." David gently shook his head. "Just a few loaves. I can still do that." He slowly put on his old apron, kneaded the dough with his own hands, then carefully placed the bread into the oven. Soon, the warm smell of fresh bread filled the little bakery once again. The three of them sat around the familiar wooden table, sharing warm bread and talking about all the years they had missed. Olivia and Ethan kept encouraging him. "Dad, you should rest more." David smiled warmly. "I will. But whenever Ethan comes to visit, I still want to bake a few loaves with my own hands, so the three of us can enjoy them together." Ethan nodded with a smile. "I'll come by often." The three of them looked at one another and smiled. Outside the window, soft sunlight bathed the little street. The smell of freshly baked bread still filled the air. Only one thing had changed. The little boy who once stood quietly outside the bakery had grown into an excellent doctor, yet in his heart, David would always be the kind man who had given him hope. Olivia would always be the older sister who had cared for him, and that little bakery would always be the place he could call home. Sometimes, the things that change a life are not the greatest ones, but the smallest acts of kindness given with all your heart.